So it's about 7:30 in the morning. We get our briskets, pork ribs, all of our proteins for the beginning of the week. We go through and upwards of 500 something briskets a week. I feel bad. It's got to go somewhere. I'll probably be vegan sooner or later. So this literally just came off the truck and now we're just loading all the inventory back up. They're just gonna unload all these. This is all of our storage for our brisket, sausage, turkey, all of our proteins go in here. So this is a prime packer brisket. We like to use Creekstone. All around great product. Whatever they're feeding those things, they make them nice and fatty, and it's a lot more beefy flavor. I want this to taste like a good steak with an accent of smoke on there. All this fat is gonna be trimmed down, but we're gonna leave a good amount on there. Not only make it moist, but it helps protect it through those long cooks. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Everything's nice and smooth. These are all the briskets that are gonna go for tomorrow. We use mustard, but it helps as a binder for the seasoning. This helps it like really set in and help develop that bark on there. For tomorrow, we got 50 getting prepped up and ready to go. And if you'll notice, he's not like rubbing the seasoning in, even though it's called a rub. You don't really wanna rub it, you wanna pat it in. If you rub it, it tends to clog up the pores and it'll start to get really salty on you. So you'll see a lot of people like rubbing it and then it gets kind of pasty and kind of like a gross texture. We try to keep everything like pretty uniform so you're getting the same bite throughout the cook. About 7 a.m. We're getting the briskets on for service. We'll put a row of big briskets in the back because they're gonna be rotated first to the front. And then we'll keep the decal off of the walls and the doors. And we'll just kind of repeat that throughout the entire process of loading this thing up. We're kind of placing them to where the bigger ones will cook at the same rate as the little bit smaller ones. You got to know the basics and really get to understand like the fire and like how the heat is transferred. I always tell people it's better to learn like on a shitty pit than it is like to go and get something like this right out the bat. It's like going from a Toyota to a Ferrari. You can't just hop on the racetrack. So you want to keep it nice and humid because heat is going to pull out whatever moisture's in the pit, and if there's nothing to pull it out of, then it's going to pull it out of the meat. You don't want too much dry heat in there. So I like to use post oak because it's a milder wood. A lot of people don't realize with wood that it has to be cured properly. It can't be a dead tree out in somebody's field for 2 years. The wood has to be split and stacked and aged like that for 12 to 14 months. So the logs will help redistribute the heat and they'll absorb the heat, but also deflect it from hitting the front of the briskets. That's it. This is our pit room. We have 5 1,000-gallon offsets made out of old propane tanks. These are all custom built. And I think there's like 16 hoods over all of these pits. If it was up to me, this whole room would have been screened in and no vent hoods. The learning curve on the pits in here was huge. This is like cooking in a lab. It's so controlled that you have to like taper it back a little bit. So these guys have been on for 4 hours. We usually check to see if the bark is set. It's important to protect the front ends of them so they're just not taking that beating that entire time. This is Reid. He's been with us at this location since it opened. Definitely cooks some of the best ribs in the state, if not the best ribs in the state. All these little steps, there's always a reason behind it. Ultimately, our goal is to let the customer, everybody get the same bite of brisket. So consistency across the board, that's the only way that's gonna happen. If you see these leans over here, they're kind of popping up a little bit. You wanna get them to lay down flat. The same as a steak. Like, a thin piece of meat when it seizes up, you don't want to do that over the course of 12 hours. So that'll help it taper it back down and it'll take less heat. We didn't always do this, but we were always like trying to think about how we can make a better product. I think what's good about Truth is we're not really stuck in our ways. We know that what we do is good, but we're always open to like, hey, we can do like this a different way. That's the only way that you can stay at the top is to evolve. Like if you get stuck in your ways, somebody's gonna pass you up sooner or later. I always like try to keep an eye out on how the meat is changing like throughout the cook. It's always trying to get that little tweak to get that perfect brisket. This is about 5 hours in the cook is when we start rotating these guys out. We try to keep them as consistent as possible. It's a lot more work, and some people will keep them in place. If there's heat's just coming right here, it's just gonna keep on coming right here, and it's not gonna feel, like this side is not gonna feel the same as this side or this side, if that makes sense. So on the wall, off the wall, into the center. Usually we'll have them in rows of 4. So the ones on the outside will crisscross and go in the center, and the ones on the center will crisscross and go to the outside. And then moving the ones in the back to the front. We keep on rotating them until they're wrapped, and then we'll do one last rotation at wrap to keep everything consistent. And so what he's doing there, like if you can see these, the fat pulling up, we'll like tip it over and dump that fat out. Because if it sits there, it'll just start to wash out that bark. What he's doing is spritzing with apple cider vinegar. We'll usually spritz the parts that, like this part of the top of the brisket, like imagine if your elbows are sticking out, like, and there's a bunch of heat, like these wings are gonna get fried pretty quick. Taking that in mind, we kind of keep those, like try to keep that area moist. It's a little bit more tedious work, but I mean, if we're gonna spend, 12, 15, 16 hours on a brisket cook, you might as well put in a little bit extra work so all the end product is better overall. So this is our trimmings from our brisket. This is all from pork ribs. We really don't want to have any waste. The only thing we can really do with it is to use it for sausage. We got 40 pounds brisket, 40 pounds pork. I like to have a little bit more pork because I like the fat content on it. There's different spices, mustard seed, paprika, garlic, onion. It's a very simple sausage just to kind of complement the rest of the meats. This is a grinder and mixer, saves a lot of time. This helps get the seasoning all throughout the sausage so that way you're not getting a bite of like just straight garlic and onion or like a super salty bite or anything like that. So these are all natural lamb casings. They're a little bit smaller. You don't want like a giant salami-sized sausage. This is like our standard house sausage. It's pretty equivalent to like kielbasa. Poking it with like the little sausage poker needle, just so that it fills all the space in there when you're rolling it up and it won't bust. We try to keep them like 1/3 pound per link. So all these sausages that we just got done stuffing, we're hanging them up to dry, so that way that the casing's nice and dried out. If you put them in like a container or anything, they'll start to change colors and the casing won't set very well. This will help extend the life of sausage. These are gonna hang up and dry out for about 48 hours.
Sausage time. It's about 8:15. We have our house sausage, our jalapeno cheddar, and our pepper jack. And I like to start from the back. That way I know how much room I have. Cooking a full pit of sausage, you want to kind of squeeze it together just so you can fit as much as you can on there. That's why I like to put in these rows, and I make sure the rows are nice and straight. That way you can put more on. So these sausage right here, they'll go on for about 30, 45 minutes.
I think if you spend more than 10 hours on anything, it becomes art. Same way with whole hog. Carolinas are so passionate about their whole hog, and it's kind of like, it's that same journey for that cook, just a different animal and a different process. Ultimately, you're still cooking around maintaining fire. So we'll pull the pig, we'll pull it out of the van, and then we'll get the saw and we're gonna have to split it. This is our whole hog. I guess I was intimidated by like, a whole animal, like 120, 140 pound pig is pretty intimidating. It's a big animal. We need to split it open because it's gonna be splayed out like that on the pit. Brisket we can do in our sleep pretty much, and it's gonna be the same, it's just repetition. I was looking for something, I was looking for a new hobby, and my therapist was like, you need to just do something new, go bowling or something. And then 2 weeks later, I got a brick pit in my backyard and I'm cooking another animal. It's like, back to where I started. When we cook whole hog, we'll usually start the burn barrel like 2-3 hours ahead of time and get a nice thing of coals going. So this is basically one giant box of hell. All this wood, it's gonna break down and it's gonna fall down into charcoal on the bottom, and that's what we'll be shoveling out and shoveling over to the cooker. When we're starting the pit up, we'll kind of line the coals all over the place to just get the temp up. Coals, they burn off a different kind of heat, and since it's direct heat, you're not really wanting all the flavor of the smoke and everything like you would with the briskets. That's the way they do it in the Carolinas, and I didn't really want to change it up too much because I wanted to be respectful of those guys, and I really appreciated the way that they were cooking out there. So this is a little guy. You really just want to get the shoulders and the hams spread apart. These are going to be the hardest parts to break down and take the most time. This is just your traditional table salt. You'll want to coat pretty heavily the skin of the pig. This is not for seasoning. This is just to protect the skin and pretty much pull all the moisture out of there. So that way we can get that nice crispy skin at the end of the cook. Now we just keep on shoveling coals under the hams and the shoulders and wait to finish it up. I don't know why more people don't do it. I think it's because like right now, like barbecue is so almost oversaturated. Like everybody's focusing on brisket. Like they're just so like dialed in, like trying to figure out how to cook that perfect brisket, and they lose track of like there's more barbecue outside of Texas. The barbecue movement's still going other places. So this is about 11, 12 hours into this cook. You really want to see this skin detaching from the muscle, like nice and soft. Fat that's rendering out in the belly will start to puddle up and it'll start to boil. So we'll check the temp on this. We're looking for about 190 in the hams and the shoulders because it's gonna spike up pretty quick. Once we start crisping that skin, it's gonna go past 200. Hang on. Let's take this guy out. The heat's different off of that plate versus the coals, and we want to kind of get it back down before we crisp the skin so we're not like shocking the skin. It'll turn colors pretty quick. These coals are so hot, you gotta be very careful. This is the most difficult part of this cook. You want to direct the coals under the skin. This is all finesse on the tail end. You can see it boiling up pretty slowly, and sometimes you'll have to finesse it with the shovel. Sometimes the skin will crisp up like immediately, and sometimes the skin won't crisp up at all. I mean, anything can happen. It's kind of wild. Cooking the pig is not a difficult process. It's this part. Did you see where the skin's like starting to puff up, starting to pull away from the rebar? That's what you're looking for. So this is done. Just the plate to flip the pig over onto. All the skin is nice and hardened up. A good color. It's got a little too dark, but that's what we're looking for. Pig's gotten down the temp, probably sat for like 2 hours. You want to detach the skin first, pick out the stuff that's not going to be able to chew very nice. Sometimes it'll get a little rubbery. Belly meat, they call it pig spaghetti, as it kind of pulls apart. You can see all the fat on there. So you kind of want to mix and match like the hams and the shoulders, and so you're getting like some fatty meat, some lean meat. Now we just need to chop it all up. Instead of that pulled texture like on pulled pork, we're going to have little chunks of it. The way Texas barbecue is to the rest of the US, Carolina, like whole hog, should be like that for the rest of the US as well. So we'll just add some salt and pepper just for flavor, because we didn't season while it was on the pit. This is like your traditional Carolina vinegar sauce. It just enhances the flavor of the pork. We're gonna mix in some of the skins. So you got the hams, you got the shoulders, you got the loins, you got the belly. All those are different textures, and then this adds that crunchiness, and it's like, I love like how many different flavors you can get in one bite. So this is done. Take it to the guys to the front so they can serve it up and turn it into sandwiches or by the pound or however people want it.
These are sausage that I put on earlier, they've been on. And you want to go by temperature and fill. So the temperature, you want it 155, 160. And on the fill, you just want to make sure it's nice and tight. That way when you bite into it, you get a nice snap. And that's what people go for. We're going to have these ready right when service starts, just because you don't really want these to be sitting in the warmer for too long. And then they'll go into this pan for service right here by our cutters, and they'll pull them out and serve them up.
Truth came from, I always wanted to stay true to Texas barbecue. We don't use gas, we don't use rotisserie pits or whatever. I always wanted to do it like authentic and stay true to Texas barbecue. Just doing it the way that it had been done, you know, in like places like Lockhart, places like Louis Mueller, places that actually like paved the way for people like us. I could have put my name on the front door, but ultimately if you want to grow, you're gonna have to have people with you, and I can't cook all the brisket in the world all the time. So luckily we have a great team here, and Truth is all of us versus just one person.